Hey, you should do Mr. Rogers. You should come in here and like put it on, you know.
Come on, be in my neighborhood.
We're ready.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everyone to the November 10th meeting, 2022 of the City County Planning Board. Would you please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Today's meeting is being broadcast live on TV 13 and will be rebroadcast at 10 a.m. Friday morning and again at 4 p.m. Sunday afternoon. Our first order of business today will be the consent agenda. These are items for which the petitioner is requesting withdrawal or continuance, or items for which staff has recommended approval and no one has signed up to speak in opposition. For all public hearings, each side will have a total of 12 minutes. There is no rebuttal period. Once the public hearing is closed and the board goes into work session, no one is permitted to speak unless a planning board member asks them a question. For general use district zoning requests, the planning board must consider the full range of uses allowed in the zoning district being requested. The petitioner may not refer to a specific use for the property. For special use district zoning requests, however, the petitioner must identify the intended use or uses of the site and give specific details on how the site will be developed. Items under Section B of the agenda will require final action by the appropriate elected body, either the City Council or County Commissioners. As such, votes taken today by the Planning Board concerning these items are recommendations that will be considered by the elected bodies during their review of the request. Before addressing the Planning Board today, we will need your name, address, and zip code for the record. Our first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the October 13th public hearing and October 27th work session. There was one addition to the public hearing minutes made by Mr. Bryan. Hopefully everyone had a chance to read. Are there any additions or corrections? Is there a motion?
Move approval, Mr. Chairman. Second.
Been motioned by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs with the appropriate additions. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign? Thank you, that is unanimous. I'm now going to call on Mark Allred today to review the consent agenda.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First thing we're looking at is cases B1, W3547, which is Box Mountain, and B33, W3550, Country Club Road Climate Storage. Those are being continued to December the 8th. We do have a continuance request that came after the agenda was made and the advertising was done for case B6, F1624. Petitioners E.M. Light Airs. It is a rezoning from RS20 to RM8S special use. The property is 15.5 acres east side of Old Hollow Road. This is a request for a continuation due to access issues. The applicant is going to need time to modify their site plan and come back in December.
Any objection? All right, without objection, that goes. Thank you.
The next case is case B2, W3549, petitioner Spear Cherry Street Holdings, LLC. The rezoning is a LO limited office to central business. It's 1.3 acres on the south side of West First Street between South Marshall and South Cherry Street. As you can see here, central business is currently on the north, east, and south side of the rezoning district. The property on three sides has sidewalks on the north, east, and west side. Transit goes by all three sides. 3 of the 4 properties are historic landmark properties with the exception of the parking lot that you see in the middle, right there. The petitioner is asking for CB for increased flexibility with building setbacks given its location in GMA 1. Staff believes this rezoning is appropriate and staff recommends the approval.
Yes.
Mr. Allred,
Yeah.
Any effect on the historic nature of those buildings, or
They go,
you anticipate that this zoning would affect that?
well, they've already gone through, I apologize. They've already gone through the historic commission. trying to
Resource
Mr.
Commission.
Bryan, they've already gone through HRC review, and any changes to those buildings, of course, would have to go back through HRC for review.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, no one has signed up. Is anyone here opposed to this recommendation? Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. What is the motion of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye. Aye. Opposed, the same side. That is unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, I further move that the planning board recommend approval of W 3549.
Second.
Do we need to state the requested condition or the change? No.
No.
Okay, that's it.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye. Aye. Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous.
This is case B4F1622. Olivet Moravian Church would like to do a rezoning from RS9 to institutional and public. The property is 2.68 acres, again, on the east side of Olivet Church Road. This property meets there's no UDO requirements. Staff does recommend the rezoning because churches fit well in institutional. IP is their perfect zone.
All right, no one is, any questions?
Well, I'll make a statement here. I assume this is for signage.
It is.
And again, I'll mention to the staff, I really think we need to modify the UDO to get to signage another way than changing to IP. But I understand.
Well, I agree with that. You're adding too many other changes just for a sign.
Yeah.
That,
Some of which
So-
are actually detrimental to the site. It's one of those things I believe we've had on a short list of our work program for a number of years. I can't remember if it made it on to it for this year. It's something that we have talked about amongst staff. I have always been an advocate of that. There has been some resistance of that because of the complex history, I'll leave it at that, of signage within Winston-Salem, Forsyth County. So there's been some reluctance to kind of, pull on that thread a little bit, but duly noted. And again, I think it does bear some investigation, at least for part of the problem. Part of the problem is Nolan and Dolan, correct?
Reed versus Gilbert.
Reed versus Gilbert is, again, case law. Anyway, their content, you can't regulate sign based on content, and we've had some discussions with the city and county attorneys because there are provisions in our ordinance that do that. So before we start going in and making changes to subcategories of those, we need to look at our ordinance more comprehensively. So I think that's the reason why we landed on something else. Is a much bigger job than just going in and addressing that. So
there's absolutely no way within our current system to allow a different sign rather than add all of these.
Or signed by youth versus the.
no, again, because again, in this case, I mean, you've got city regulations, you've got county regulations. They're different on how they treat churches. They're different. You can't have any illuminated signs in RS zoning in the county, whereas you can in the city, but you can't have an electronic message board sign in RS zoning. There are all kinds of little nuances. So to answer your question, there's not an easy way to kind of thread that needle.
Yeah.
But I agree, it's something that we need to do because, basically it's similar to something we're going to hear in a little while. We keep having these and we've never denied any of them, and they're generally always being done because of signage. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to find a different way to tackle it, but we don't have kind of the game plan at this point.
I would ask us to please put that on the list to receive future attention.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Great discussion. Any further discussion?
Sounds like it.
Is anyone here opposed to this recommendation? No one has signed up. All right, I declare the public hearing closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Aye. That is unanimous.
No, it's-
Oh, opposes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, as far as
Two.
it being,
As far as being IP, okay,
yeah.
2 opposed.
And I further move that the planning board recommend approval of F 1622.
Have a motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye. Aye. Opposed, the same sign. One opposition. That does pass.
The next is case B5, F1623, RS Parker Homes LLC. This is a site plan amendment for a RS40 special use zone site, which is 96.22 acres on the north side of Van Hoy Road. The site plan amendment is to amend and approve site plan for F1595 to revise access point locations. And one thing we're also going to discuss, if you kind of see the middle, you see Blues Lake, it cuts in and there's some stream tributaries. This cuts the northern section from the southern section. There's pretty large topography between these two. I'll discuss in a second. Here is the northern section site plan. So these thick black line that you see coming down, this is the Guilford-Forsyth County boundary line. So Forsyth County is on the west, Guilford's in the middle. And what you can't, it's kind of hard to see. It's a light dotted line that blends in. This is the town of Stokesdale. So you've got Forsyth County, Guilford County, and then Stokesdale. The original access point that was in Guilford and Stokesdale came from the north. You can kind of see the point still right there. It has now been moved down to the south. There was a connector road at one time that connected the northern section to the southern section. Due to topography issues, this is now no longer a connection. It is a utility access easement, which I'll show here. So you see the utility access easement when it cuts across that portion. Again, if you remember the first picture of the lake and the streams, cuts across, it's right here. The only portion that's in Forsyth County is that little section right here. So that access point that went into Guilford County is no longer there. The original access that goes into Bent Ridge Forest Drive, which is in Guilford County, is still there. The density of this development is still, it's very similar. They actually took one lot off. Originally it was rezoned for 75 lots. Now it's 74.
Spread amongst the two areas,
Yeah, spread
correct?
amongst the two areas, that's correct. So again, this totally meets UDO requirements, and staff does recommend approval.
I've got a question. So in reading some of the materials, it sounds like the reason behind the request was the topography issues with the connector road.
Yeah.
But what about the topography changed between when this site was originally approved and now? I mean, the topography has not changed, right?
Well, my understanding is that when they re-looked at it, they can no longer make the connection. So,
Well, I mean, there's a difference between topography changing and budgets changing.
yeah.
And I mean, I've got some concern about the lack of connectivity, obviously because we like connectivity, but also because of I think the impact of the traffic flow out the south end of, I guess, phase 2 is going to put a whole lot more traffic out that way potentially than if there had been that connection.
Just keep in mind, again, it's one of those things where, sometimes I wish folks would listen to the advice of staff whenever staff provides it. This project could have been developed under the existing AG zoning, except for the fact they had to do 150-foot wide lots versus 100-foot wide lots. Had they done that, this would have more than likely been able to be approved at the staff level as far as this change, but because it's a site-specific development plan that was vetted by this board and went on to the elected body, a change in access points by the county's staff change authority can't be done at the staff level. It has to be done at the elected body level. The number of units has not changed. It's one of those things where because of the approval process they went through, they've kind of gotten themselves into this jam of having to go back to the elected body. I'm not trying to advocate one way or the other, but the number of units has not changed. The one thing I will say that has changed from the earlier iteration of this to today is the fire code has changed. There used to be a limitation of no more than 30 lots via a single access. And that may have driven a connection in between those two to provide a second means of ingress and egress between these respective projects. Because this one in and of itself is more than 30, the other one I think is probably on the line of 30. The fire code was revised within the last year to basically say that no more than 100.
Wow.
So I think that's probably what has brought this back through the process, is because the connection was tenuous to begin with, and with the change in the statute, the connection is no longer needed. Again, it's a board and ultimately an elected body decision, and I'll leave it at that.
So to clarify, the previous one that we looked at was sort of in the middle of the development.
Well, again, there are two different things. If Mark will go back to the image before this one, if you'll notice, there's a faint line around the middle of the site. I believe that was where the original access was proposed.
Yeah, it was right at the Stokesdale, Guilford County line.
And now they've relocated it a little bit further to the south. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's one aspect, and that change is wholly within. That has nothing to do with our jurisdiction. That's within Stokesdale and Guilford County. The change that is within our jurisdiction is where this stub road, coming out of that access and utility easement that's still shown on the plan, again, still within Guilford County, if you'll go to the next image, where it makes that turn in between lots 41 and 42. That's where the access was originally shown. So there's the only change is getting rid of the stub street, the portion of that access, the portion of that road that connected into Guilford County through the other part of the subdivision. That's the only portion that's changed within our jurisdiction. I mean, and so, again, I don't know where they are with their approval process with Guilford County and Stokesdale. That's part of the problem whenever you have projects that straddle jurisdictions and jurisdictional boundaries. Essentially in this case, whatever process they have to go through with Guilford County and Stokesdale is independent of what we do. So, let's say that we're adamant that, that connection has to be made. Well, theoretically, all they'd have to do would be to build it to the edge of their property, the edge of what's within Forsyth County, stop it. And if Stokesdale and Guilford County say they don't have to build it, we're no different than what's being proposed here, except we have a stub if they were ever to change their mind and do it in Guilford and Stokesdale. So, again, it's kind of one of those situations where you're on the line with multiple jurisdictions. You've got multiple cooks in the kitchen, so to speak.
Now, our vote wouldn't negate Guilford from requiring that, right?
It would not, and what I would assume is if Guilford County and Stokesdale said, no, you've got to do this, then more than likely what they would do here would be to, that's a good question. I don't know whether they could say, can we just go back to our original plan of approval, or would they have to go back through the process again? We'll have to vet that internally. But if Stokesdale and Guilford County say, no, we're not going to allow you to approve this within our jurisdiction, then they would have to do the connection here too to make it work.
Is it possible to put that as a condition that they don't have to come back?
That might be something that, if the planning board so desires to make a condition of approval, we're approving this condition upon the removal of the interconnectivity from Stokesdale and Guilford County. Should Stokesdale and Guilford County deny that, then we would allow the developer to go back to the original plan approved through case number 1597, whatever. We can craft some language if that's what the planning board desires. We can craft some language and include that in the recommended condition that goes forward to the county commissioners.
That's a good idea.
Any additional questions or comments? All right. No one has signed up. Is anyone here opposed to this recommendation? Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. Before the motion is made, I think there's been some additions that if you wanted to put that in there, we could.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Second.
Been motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Aye, that is unanimous.
And then, Mr. Chairman, I further move the planning board recommend approval of F-1623 with the conditions that'll have to be restated or.
Approval with a condition that if Stokesdale and Guilford County do not approve the elimination of the interconnecting street, that the developer could then, revert back to the formerly approved plan
Coming back to the plan.
F-1597.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, okay.
Okay. Pardon my motion. Thank you.
Good job.
We have a motion by Mr. Lamb. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposes? That is unanimous.
Okay, the next case is C1, 2022-128 Northwalk. This is a 6-lot subdivision in RS9 zoning. It's a 9.79 acres south side of Ziegler Road and east of Tommy's Lake Road. Something to mention is that the top portion, this is a stream, that's also a ward district. This portion will not be part of the subdivision when you see the site plan. So if you can remember the creek up here, this is not part of that. So again, this is a basic 6-lot subdivision that meets minimum UDO requirements, and staff recommends approval.
Move approval.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? Yes.
Mr. Aldridge.
Yeah.
Development in this area seems to be spurred somewhat by the bypass. And I didn't realize how you get from this to the bypass until I went out and took a look at it. But are we expecting more development in there? And are they all going to take that 2-lane road over and then catch what, University, and go up and then catch the bypass there? Is that sort of the thinking when this area gets more and more development? Now, I know we run through the sanitation area on the way over to this and some other things like that.
I mean, it depends on where you're going, obviously. You're talking about going to Greensboro, I'm assuming. They're trying to get over to Greensboro. Is that what you're?
Well, I mean, to the bypass, I mean, it eventually gets you everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's possible.
yeah,
It's really one I can't answer.
okay.
There's a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous.
This is case D1, PBR 2022-19, cottages at Harper Court. This is an 8-lot cottage court in RS9, 1.41 acres. Like the last one, the western portion of this site, you kind of see my cursor, this portion won't be on the site plan. So on this one, you've got, again, 8 cottage courts, common areas in the middle. You know, they face the common area. Parking's in the southeast of the property, garbage pickups off of Harper Road in 2 different spots. This meets UDA requirements for cottage courts. Staff recommends approval.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion?
Mr. Aldridge, the requirements of buffering on a parking lot, what's that like with cottage court? I mean, we have yet to have a cottage court come in front of us that was like the example that was purported to promote cottage courts.
And we never
This-
will.
I guess not, but this has a parking lot both on a side that I guess is residential and on the street.
Right.
Are they both required to have buffering?
Mr. Bryan, only the side adjacent to residential would have a buffer yard. A street yard would be required where there's parking adjacent to a street.
What kind of yard?
A street yard.
Okay.
So there's 4 deciduous trees that you see
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So anything else they add is something they're adding additional. So.
And this does meet the buffer on the side there?
It does.
Okay.
I have a question, not particularly about this site. I think you all approved the cottage court before I joined the board. And I've seen 2, maybe, since I've been on the board. Are any of them actually built yet that you know of? I just want to go drive by them. I want to see what they look like, like finished. None of them have been finished yet.
Mr. Godfrey's was the first one off of Cliffdale, I believe, or thereabouts. Turner Street, and So
Nothing's been built yet.
Oh, okay, all right. Okay, I'll wait. I just wanted to see what they look like.
Although, isn't there a development on Cliffdale or somewhere like that is like a cottage court? There are 4 houses. Was it a subdivide with the driveway going in the middle or something?
That was probably just done by a minor subdivision via private
That's what I
access
think,
easement.
but I mean, it has sort of that feel for a cottage court without the explicit requirement
You're
of
gonna have
the
to travel.
area.
Yeah, you're gonna have to go somewhere.
But you can get there on the Beltway.
I'll honestly say, this one comes a lot closer to the original concept than a lot that we have seen because it all does kind of front on the, the open space with a pedestrian path around it versus, some of the other ones haven't kind of done this. You've got to walk a little ways to get to it, which I think is good. So again, I don't know that you'll ever see any specifically like the examples that we had because the examples that we had weren't local. And again, we're dealing with different realities here, but.
Okay.
I can show you some beautiful examples in England.
Can't get there on the Beltway.
That's what they showed us.
Are you paying for us to go and what?
So we do have a motion and a second on the floor. Any further discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye. Aye. Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous.
All right, so this is a case D2 PBR 2022-20 Fiddler's Creek Farm. This is an 82-lot planned residential development in RS9, 40.94 acres on the south side of Friedland Church Road. The access to this property is right here on Freeland Church Road. There is 2 other stubs on the southwest part of the property. Sidewalks on both sides of the street. There's 2 common recreation areas, one in the middle, one at the entrance area. There is a greenway that's going to be between Fiddler's Creek and the development. Let's see, and this does meet UDO requirements for a planned residential development, and staff does recommend approval.
Move approval.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. That is unanimous.
Elizabeth, his text amendment will be coming up next.
Mr. Chairman, the board is item B7 in your agenda packet.
That's true. That's true.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning Board. We're looking at the request summary this evening, the planning petitioner being the Planning and Development Services staff. The request is to amend Chapter 9, nonconformities of the UDO to revise off-street parking requirements for restaurant uses in older buildings located in GMAs 1 and 2. How do you move the slides?
Oh, I'm sorry. Just click down.
Oh, down. I thought it was over.
Oh, shoot. Hold on one second. Well, there we go, yeah. Just up or down. There you go.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
So the background on this that we've discussed,
we're still seeing the same slide.
Click down, see if it.
I did change it.
Well, we can make this work in a different way. So what we'll do is we'll just go back.
why does it not show that slide?
I don't know. Slideshow. Let's just.
I can just give you the background.
Let's see. Yeah, I don't know why it's showing up in front on ours, but. Get off this slide. Escape.
Yes. Go ahead. I'm gonna see if he can do it. If not, we'll move on. Kirk, I think we'll be okay. Yeah, we'll be okay. If you just describe it, I think we're familiar.
We're familiar from the
Yeah,
work
we're
session.
familiar with it.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, y'all. So the background, like I said, in 2006, there was a text amendment approved by city, county, and the county commissioners that did provide greater flexibility for changes of use in these older buildings that were non-residential buildings, originally built as non-residential buildings. These provisions back in 2006 allowed changes of use to occur in these older buildings constructed prior to 1968 in the county and 1988 in the city without any requirements for added additional current off-street parking standards. The uses that were excluded from this text amendment were electronic sweepstakes and restaurant uses. And those uses were excluded because of concerns that increased parking might not be able to be met on the site because these buildings are non-conforming, and then parking might go on to adjoining neighborhood streets and impact local neighborhoods. So these two uses were still required to comply with the current UDO standards, or they had the option of seeking an approved elected body special use permit. So those are the only two options for establishing uses in these older buildings. And with those special use permits, they were required to still retain any on-site parking with the special use permit approval. Yeah, so I don't know if y'all will be able to see this. Nope. Oh, yeah, okay.
You can see it on your computer, they can't see it on the screens.
Okay. Oh. Alrighty, so our staff analysis on this, many businesses in GMAs 1 and 2 are located within older structures that are already non-conforming to current off-street parking requirements today. And since 2006, when UDO 160 was approved, only 7 special use permits that were all in the city have been requested for that staff is aware of for restaurant parking exemptions, and all of those special use permits have been approved. 4 of the 7 parking exemption special use permits were actually approved since August of 2020. And that kind of shows staff that there's an increased interest in reusing commercial sites in the city's urban core. So in summary, the proposed text amendment revises the UDO to remove requirement for an approved elected body special use permit for a reduction in required off-street parking for these restaurant uses in older commercial buildings in GMAs 1 and 2. Any existing parking on site must be retained, and the proposed language will simplify the approval process for business owners and applicants to establish restaurant uses in GMAs 1 and 2, which promote more adaptive reuse of these older buildings in the urban core. And staff does not anticipate any significant negative impacts on surrounding residential neighborhoods as a result of the proposed change. And going back to 2006, since staff has not been made aware of any special use permits that were approved for restaurants being an issue, that's why we would say that we don't anticipate any additional significant negative impacts or effects. And so, in summary and recommendation, the UDO text amendment, staff does recommend approval of this text amendment. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
And I want to thank Ms. Colyer for sending me over the addresses of these special use. Ms. Colyer, do you know how many of these have actually developed into what they requested?
So I can see this, y'all probably can't. The special use permit W3443 that was approved in 2020, that restaurant use has come in for permits. The 3 additional ones approved since then, I did not find any building permits for those addresses. The one in 2008, W2999, that I do not believe is a restaurant use anymore. And I'm not sure if it's vacant.
Where's it located?
626 East Monmouth Street. It might actually be a sweepstakes.
It very well could, but that's a heavy, I mean, there's a lot of commercial activity there, I know that.
And that one's zoned HB also. The rest are zoned PB or PBHO that have been approved. And then W2947 was approved in 2007. That's at 113 Burke Street. And there are about 20 existing parking spaces in that location. And then W2918 was approved in 2007 at 675 West 5th Street. It's a little strip shopping center that faces the side street, and there's about 15 parking spaces existing there. And I don't know if there's a restaurant today in that location or the one on Burke Street. I believe on Burke Street there is. I'm sorry, that's Burke Street Pizza, yes.
Yeah, what's interesting, the number, the one on Monmouth is the signage says it's an arcade. I haven't seen it open, but it is, the signage has the lights like you see at arcades, and it says, I think it even has the word arcade and things like that at it. But I think what we have here, we have 7 that have been approved, 1 that has actually happened, which is in a busy area of Burke Street, where Burke Street Pizza was, and before there was a coffee shop, and there's bars across, and it's very much accommodated that over the years, and that's been very good. But what we have is also that 6 out of the 7 are in the West End or on the edge of the West End. So, of course, I'm very familiar with this as a board member of that group and have watched the development of this. Our only say when these cases come to us, as Jason helped me understand, was that we can either say that the building meets the requirements or not. We can't say anything about the parking, but in each case that has come to us, I've had plenty to say about the parking that I couldn't say, that has come from the neighborhoods and the understanding about this and trying to accommodate this. So when I look at this, what I see is that 950 Brookstown hasn't been open. 421 Summit Street has not been open. 461 West End has not been open. 492 West End has not been open. 218 on Spring Street is not a restaurant anymore. The arcade place is not operating that I could tell. Maybe it is. And so that leaves one place, which is Burke Street, which has worked out, and already had it already had a history of that before this was ever brought to us as a city council. So I really think we need to wait and see on this, and we need to see what kind of effect it does have, because we've got historic buildings, and these are fine. They already had commercial uses, that's true. But what we've done is that we're forcing on what used to be an office building or a garage or something like that. We're forcing restaurant into that space, which means that you have numbers of people that are sitting down and there for a half hour to an hour or something like that. And it changes the dynamics. I don't think the situation has been figured out at this point. And I think it was the wisdom of the city council member that said, let's take a look at these and see what kind of effect it has, and we'll figure out a way to help it out and help the development occur if that time comes when there is an issue along the way. And we do not have a record on this, and it is all piled on the West End. And the one that I think is probably a more interesting example is the one with the arches there on Haynes Park. That used to be a pharmacy, used to have diagonal parking that handled things. It was very much as we were growing up, it was a place that you would go and there was a lot of traffic there. But the place right next to it was more or less a service station. So the service station is now a very, very active bar with parking all over the place that has caused numerous problems that the neighborhood is handling, by permits and parking signs and things like that. But that means now that the Arches is really adding to what was never meant to be an issue with a business along that way. And then I could go through each of these examples of how we're sort of holding a restaurant that has totally different dynamics into a place. So I think it's wise to keep this in front of a body that looks at these kinds of things. I think that I'm not sure that the city council even knows that all of these that they've approved have not come into existence at this point. So, I mean, my motion would be to move denial with hoping that this would come back to us when there is a track record on these establishments actually being formed. And it may die for lack of a second, but that's my motion.
We do have a motion on the floor for denial. Is there a second?
I'll second it just for the purpose of letting the board discuss it.
There's been 7 apps, and we've never had a lack of an approval on any of the requests so far, right?
That's correct.
That's correct. And
That's the driving factor for me, is that, why make them jump through the hoops if we're just going to go ahead and approve every one of them? That's the biggest thing.
And the city council is too.
Yeah.
And I think fruition of the actual business, we have to recognize that there was a pandemic that happened in the time that most of these were approved. And we have to have a little bit of grace that a lot of businesses just couldn't launch. Right. We're coming back. And I want to give every economic development opportunity the best chance it has going forward, and an additional month at best to come through our process, and we're just going to approve it, can be detrimental to that.
Mr. Chairman, just a reminder of where this was a specific request of council, was to look at this. I mean, and again, looking at the track record, looking at the fact that if there is a parking problem in the areas that would be impacted, there's never been anyone that has spoken at a city council meeting on parking issues. There's never been anyone that's reached out to our office on parking issues as well. And this gets back to, whenever these changes were proposed in the 2000s, the council member of the ward, had concerns related to spillover from Burke Street into the neighborhood. Again, I haven't heard of any complaints related to that, and no one has spoken at a council meeting regarding those complaints, either in general or specifically related to any of the requests that have come forward. But again, that's just some of the history and the context behind the request. It's ultimately a board decision as far as what the recommendation to council would be. What will happen is, when this moves away from the planning board, this will go back to council committee. They will discuss it there, and then it will go forward to the full council whenever the Community Development, Housing, and General Government Committee feels like it's ready to move forward. So there will be other opportunities.
Council, is there a recommendation we would like to remit back?
What's that?
How do you want to handle this?
I'd move that we recommend approval.
Okay.
You got a motion.
There's a motion on the floor, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Oh, I'm
Previous motion and second is on the floor for denial. All those in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, so one opposition. All right, so we're gonna move now for,
I would move that we recommend approval.
we now have a motion for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been motion and second by Mr. Lamb and Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? All those in favor, sign of aye. Aye. All those opposed? One. All right. That I think that is a great case. This is kind of the second thing we've had in my opinion, brought back to us by council, one we dealt with for a long time. Just kind of note that.
Duly noted.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, we do have one extra item we did want to add on to the agenda because of the fact we're not having a work session for the next 2 months. There was an item that's kind of been hanging out there that we feel like needs to be moved forward, and it's something we've been working on for engineering. We sent out to you a draft of UDO CC 20, which is a clarification on the plating requirements in the ordinance. Since we generally, under our general rules of procedure, we bring something to a work session and then we bring you back the full text amendment. We're going to treat this as your work session, and then we'll bring you something back if it's the board's desire at your December meeting for an actual hearing. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. Okay. Just want to make sure we're on the same page. This item we vetted at the September Quarterly Development Forum. Wes Kimmerell from engineering discussed this with the Quarterly Development Forum group. There were a couple questions. There were no concerns voiced at that meeting. Once we had the language formally written, we sent this out to the Quarterly Development Forum distribution, asked them to take a look at it and get us any concerns that they had. We heard no concerns from that group either. Just a little bit of history, as I was explaining to the chairman this morning. Steve, I promise I'll let you say something, but I might be forestalling some things. Prior to the mid-2000s, our plating requirement allowed 100% bonding of all improvements, and folks could go out and start building houses before they had any infrastructure in. That worked well for decades when we were dealing with our local development community, but then lo and behold, we had a tract builder that came in, basically did what the ordinance said, got their houses built before all their infrastructure was complete, had COs issued. We had the utilities had to have a pump and haul permit for their sewer in the lines because the outfall wasn't fully constructed. Lots of issues. So in the mid-2000s, we swung the pendulum from that bit of having no regulations to basically having, you had to have your subdivision fully constructed, final layer of asphalt down, everything before you could get a building permit. Well, we swung the pendulum too far. That was a little bit of overkill. So then, in the late 2000s, early 2010s, I believe we came and moved that needle back in the middle. It's been working well all this time. The local development community has never come in and started pulling permits before they had that bottom or first lift of asphalt down, even though the ordinance wasn't explicit that said you had to. Fast forward to the last 6 or 8 months, we've had an out-of-town, again, tract builder want to push the envelope on that, and Wes has had to hold the line. So in order to assist him, we have what we have in front of you today with these, 2 or 3 changes in words, which makes it clear that that first layer of asphalt has to be down prior to getting a plat signed. And that's kind of a 90-second recap of kind of where we are.
All right.
Steve, do you have anything to add?
I think that was pretty good.
I just did all right.
Questions.
Okay.
But it just clarifies it. I have copies of the memo and the ordinance, a draft ordinance if needed. If not, only thing I would add is that I'm going to give an older history lesson, which is prior to requiring, when I did subdivision administration in another locality decades ago, it was like here where you could provide a surety for 100% of the cost of the infrastructure and be able to sell lots and start building. And fortunately, we didn't have that. I had to run a letter of credit to a bank the day before the 4th of July. They didn't accept it because it was a copy. And the problem was I didn't realize till that morning that it was due that day, and the builder had a heart attack. Developer, so he was in the hospital recovering. So the original was with the city clerk, and they were off the day before the 4th of July. So all I had to do is I had to drive to Mount Airy with a copy of a letter of credit, and of course the bank they kept it, but I didn't get any money. But they did get the attention of the developer. He said I was, recovering from a heart attack. Fortunately, it worked out. But it goes back to the old days where you you've seen situations where there's been paper streets, where we're trying to close unopened rights of ways. Those were in the days where they didn't have to post any surety. They just platted it, and, you know, if it got built, fine. If it didn't, it didn't. So that's where we've gone from there to getting a little more tighter on it so that we can make sure that it gets built.
Thank you.
And I think Chris covered everything else very well.
All right.
I would just like to ask, what is the extent of the requirement relative to where the first bottom layer of asphalt has to be completed? Is it throughout the entire subdivision?
It's the area where they're trying to get platted.
Okay.
Yeah. So if they're doing things by phases, it would be whatever phase they're trying to record the plat for.
Good, thank you for that.
I mean, thanks to staff. This is a great job of trying to balance all the competing interests that y'all have to deal with, and it sounds like you've really worked with all your different stakeholders on this, so thank you for doing this.
I guess I would very quickly add, the reason for requiring the first bottom base layer is to ensure that gravel, if the stone base is exposed through the winter, it can deteriorate and it shortens the life of the street. So if it's a public street, it means the city's got to go out and maintain it shorter than it, more quickly than it normally does. So that's the reason behind it.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, absent any issues or, things you want us to work on, what we'll do is we'll just plan on bringing this back to your
I
December 8th
think
meeting.
everyone is in agreement.
Okay.
It was very easy to read this morning too, so that was good.
Well, I'm glad for that. Mr. Chairman, Board, that brings us to the basically the staff report. And just a few items that I have there, kind of a preview of your December zoning cases. Of course, you did continue 3 items today. Those will be added to 7 new cases. There is, for December, I'm sorry, I don't know what I said.
Oh, December's Christmas.
Yes. But it's December 8th. It's early, I think it's early in the process. We'll have one text amendment, which is the one that we just discussed here. There are 2 subdivisions and 1 planned residential development on your docket for December. Again, keep in mind there'll be no work session in November, unless you want to show up on Thanksgiving. I think you'll be alone, but we won't have one then, and of course we won't have one in December. We will have, as is tradition, when we meet in person, which has been a couple years since we've had that as a tradition, we will have a little heavier food available on December 8th for the holidays for your planning board meeting. Not sure if we'll have that up here, whether we'll have it downstairs in our conference room before the meeting. We'll make that decision, and we'll communicate that back out to the board prior to that meeting. The only other thing I had was just a note. David Reed's retirement celebration will be on November 30th at noon, and it will be located in the utilities conference room, which is the 2nd floor of this building, or as better known as your former conference room you had for work session. You won't recognize it when you go in there, but it is where you used to hold your work sessions. They totally renovated the 2nd floor, so but that's where his retirement celebration will be. It's at noon
Until
Out of food.
Yeah, until we run out of food or no one's there anymore. I would say probably to make sure that we're still there 10 to like 1:30. But I mean, again, I could see it still going to 2.
all right.
Just remember, David is trying to retire.
You'll send us something on that, Chris? Will you send us something on that?
Yes, we can send something out to the planning board as a reminder.
I thought this was great. This is a great slide. This is very funny.
It's great. It's beautiful.
Fantastic. Yeah.
That just made me smile.
It made me.
We're going to be here a while in December.
Oh, I didn't notice the 3 French hens.
That's pure Mark Allred.
This is hysterical. It's wonderful.
Yeah. All right.
And Mr. Chairman, that's all I have.
All right. Is there anything else for the good of the order?
Oh, you're dead over here.
I'll see you.
We were talking about the issue with the IP zoning, just to get the sign arrangement. Can we, I think you mentioned this. Can we go ahead and put that on our next work agenda or something soon, so that we don't
to discuss amongst y'all, or do you want us to put it on as a future work program to discuss for next year? Or is it something you want to discuss at a work session in January?
We can start
January
with
or
the work
February?
session.
Well, I think next year is fine. I mean, I just don't want to give them like a task before, like now in January to do that. I think if we put it on next year's for us to,
Yeah,
I think as
to
a,
start with a discussion with, I just don't want to lose track of it.
For the work
because-
program for like, say, FY 23-24?
No, I'm thinking just a discussion on.
Discussion at a work session between now and June. Preferably
Earlier.
January, February.
The vice chair just said if you give it to David, we would probably get it sooner.
Yeah, he's got motivation.
You might not get it at all.
Side of the coin there.
He'll be glad to do it for a consulting fee in addition to his retirement
You know, it's
pay.
funny because now that I think about it, he's who I remember carrying the sign back and forth, I think, so.
I know Gary did it for a while, Rob did it for a long time, so. Okay, but yes, we'll add something to a future work session on that.
Is there anything else for the good of the order?
We'll have our motion to adjourn. Everybody have a good Thanksgiving.
Everybody have a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank y'all very much.